14th century Italy was a world trembling between faith and fear. Plague devoured cities, wars divided kingdoms, and even the church itself was torn in two. Amid the thunder of chaos, a young woman from an ordinary family in Siena would rise, not with armies or crowns, but with fire in her heart and words that could move popes. Her name was Catherine Benincasa, and history would remember her as Saint Catherine of Siena, the woman who spoke truth to power and taught the world that holiness has no gender, no throne, and no fear. Catherine was born in 1347, the 23rd of 25 children. Her father was a humble dyer. Her mother, a strong-willed woman who managed the crowded household with discipline and faith. From her earliest years, Catherine's eyes carried an intensity that made people uneasy, as if she saw something invisible. At 6, she experienced her first vision. She saw Jesus, radiant and crowned with light, standing above the church of San Domenico. He smiled at her. In that instant, she gave her life to him. She was only a child, but her heart was already aflame. When she reached 12, her parents began arranging a marriage, as was custom. But Catherine refused. She cut off her hair, her only beauty, and declared that she would belong to no one but Christ. Her family was furious. They tried to break her will with chores, scolding, and isolation. Yet Catherine's resolve only deepened. She turned the small corner of her family's home into a sanctuary, fasting and praying for hours, her mind consumed by the thought of divine love. She learned not from books, but from silence. Later she would say, "Build a cell inside your heart, and never leave it." At 16, she joined the Dominican Tertiaries, a lay branch of the order that allowed her to live at home, yet follow a strict life of penance and prayer. The sisters wore white veils and black mantles. Catherine wore the same. She cared for the poor, nursed the sick, and served lepers abandoned outside the city walls. Her tenderness for the suffering came from her mystical sense that every human being carried the face of Christ. But behind that tenderness burned a fierce courage. When the plague swept through Siena in 1348, she walked straight into infected houses to comfort the dying. Fear had no power over her because she believed love was stronger than death. By her 20s, something extraordinary was happening. People began to sense an unseen presence around her. Her prayer seemed to bend the air. Men and women from all walks of life, merchants, priests, nobles, came to her for counsel. They called her Mama Caterina. She dictated letters to scribes, hundreds of them, written in the fiery Tuscan dialect that would one day help shape the Italian language itself. Her words were not refined, but alive, pulsing with truth. Be who God meant you to be, and you will set the world on fire. Yet Catherine's fire soon reached beyond Siena. Italy at that time was fractured. The Papacy had abandoned Rome and moved to Avignon, France, where 7 popes had lived in luxury for nearly 70 years. The church had become distant, political, afraid. Catherine, barely 30, felt a divine command to speak out. She wrote to princes, cardinals, and even to Pope Gregory XV himself, urging him to return to Rome and reform the church. Imagine it. A young, uneducated woman telling the most powerful men in Christendom what to do, and doing it with such purity of heart that they listened. Her letters were not filled with anger, but with love sharpened by truth. "Sweet Christ on earth," she called the Pope, "do not be a timorous child. Be manly in the face of temptation. God has appointed you to heal his bride, not wound her." Her words carried no flattery, only conviction. To the rulers of Florence, who were at war with the Papal States, she wrote, "Peace, peace, peace. War is not from God, but from the devil, who is father of division." Many dismissed her as mad, But those who met her felt something irresistible, the authority of holiness, the serenity of someone who feared only God. In 1376, Catherine traveled to Avignon to meet Pope Gregory V in person. She was 29, small in stature, dressed in the coarse white and black of the Dominicans. The palace corridors glimmered with marble and gold, cardinals in crimson robes watching this barefoot woman walk past. When she was brought before the Pope, she knelt and looked straight into his eyes. Her voice, witnesses said, was gentle but unbreakable. She begged him to leave Avignon, to return to the tombs of the apostles, to lead by example. Gregory the Reformed hesitated, but Catherine's faith pierced his indecision. Months later, he left France and returned to Rome, ending the Avignon exile forever. It was one of the most extraordinary acts of moral persuasion in church history. But triumph did not bring peace. Soon after Gregory's death, rival factions elected two popes, one in Rome and one in Avignon. The Great Schism began, tearing Christendom apart. Once again, Catherine threw herself into the storm, pleading for unity. She wrote tirelessly, calling the Church to repentance, not politics. "The bark of Peter," she wrote, "is leaking from all sides, but do not abandon the ship." She urged reform not by rebellion, but by love that corrects. Her courage made her a bridge between heaven and earth, faith and power, male and female, silence and speech. Catherine's inner life was no less dramatic. She experienced mystical visions of Christ and the saints, moments of ecstatic union that defied description. In one vision, she saw herself mystically wed to Jesus. He placed a ring on her finger, invisible to others, but real to her. Her spirituality was not abstract, it was a love story. She called God the sea in which my soul is immersed, and in that sea she found both agony and ecstasy. She once said, "The soul cannot live without love. We are created by love, for love." Yet the same love that filled her with joy also brought suffering, for she carried within her the pain of the world. As she grew older, her health deteriorated. Years of fasting and exhaustion left her frail, but her spirit burned brighter than ever. She moved to Rome to continue advising the Pope, now Urban VI, during one of the most turbulent times in church history. Even there, she faced suspicion and slander. Some accused her of overstepping her place as a woman. Others called her a fanatic. But she answered calmly, "I am only doing what love compels me to do." Her mission was never about authority. It was about fidelity. She saw herself as a small flame in the darkness, trusting that even one flame can set hearts ablaze. In 1380, at only 33, Catherine collapsed while praying for the unity of the Church. Paralyzed and unable to move, she spent her final weeks offering her suffering for peace. Her last words were a whisper of surrender. "Father, into your hands I commend my spirit." She died surrounded by her companions, her face serene, her body thin as a candle burned to its base. Her fire had consumed her, but death did not silence her. Within a century, she was canonized. Centuries later, she was declared a Doctor of the Church, one of only 4 women in history to bear that title. Her writings, especially the dialogue, remain among the most luminous works of Christian mysticism, blending passionate love with clear reason. She showed that theology can be born not only from study, but from intimacy with God. Catherine's legacy is both fierce and tender. She reminds the world that holiness is not passive. It is active, courageous, and inconvenient. She proved that truth, spoken in love, has more power than armies. Her courage was not rebellion. It was obedience to a higher authority. And perhaps that is her greatest lesson. that the heart fully surrendered to God can shake the thrones of men without lifting a sword. In an age where voices are silenced by fear or flattery, Catherine's voice still echoes. Cry out as if you had 1,000 voices. It is silence that kills the world. She calls each soul to the same radical honesty, to live in truth even when truth costs everything. Her life is a mirror for our own, to stand in the light of conscience, to love enough to confront, and to trust that courage rooted in charity can change history. So when you feel too small to make a difference, remember Catherine, the dyer's daughter who told popes what heaven desired. When power feels untouchable, remember that one heart, inflamed by divine love, can become more luminous than any crown. And when the world tells you to stay silent, remember her words. Be who God meant you to be, and you will set the world on fire.